bankruptcy. Now, for banks, we have a special process because they're too central to the working of our economy.
Right.
So we have a system we call conservatorship, where the shareholders lose everything, the bondholders may lose everything, the government may have to put money in, but may not, because if you convert the debt, the bondholders, the long-term bondholders into the new shareholders, that may be all you need to do. It's a financial restructuring. It happens all the time. And the more you make the bondholders and the shareholders pay, the less the taxpayers have to pay.
Right.
If you let the bondholders and the shareholders get off the hook, the taxpayers have to put more money, and you have this problem, moral hazard. 10 years ago, you know about this.
Yep.
This is exactly what the IMF and the U.S. Treasury told all the banks to do.
Yes.
They
close them up. Close them down.
All of the, and in Thailand they did that. In Indonesia they did that.
So this is double standard.
Very clearly double standard. They did it wrong, by the way, when they did it here.
Right.
But hopefully they could have learned the lesson on how to do it well. Because they saw the mistakes they made.
Why did they have this double standard? Is it because Obama could have faced some serious political consequences if he didn't bail out the banks?
The financial sector has 5 lobbyists for every congressman. Major campaign contributions. They tried to sell the idea that if you play by the rule of capitalism, the whole thing would fall apart. If you have good governance,
right,
it actually would make the economy stronger. What happens is you have a system where you've given out these hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yes.
Everybody wants in.
Sure.
Everybody, the car companies, the car suppliers, everybody says, well, why do you give them, what about us? So you have double standards between Asia and America. You have double standards within America. We fired the president of GM, but the guys who in Wall Street got into the mess haven't done anything about them.
No.
So we have all this double standard, which really undermines confidence in government. It gives you a smell of corruption. It's corruption American style, but it's
still corruption.
It's corruption.
Yes. But President Obama's excuse may be that if we let the financial institutes fall, if we let the automobile companies fall, the whole economy, the whole world's economy will collapse.
But here again, we see the double standard. In the case of GM and Chrysler, he saved the companies, but not the shareholders.
Right.
He could have done that in Citibank. He could have done that in Bank America. That's playing by the rules of capitalism. But he chose not to play by the rules of capitalism. For no good reason. For no good reason.
Why so?
Because they try to tell a story. The story was you would create panic. Yes. The same story they tell.
Use the word panic to prevent panic.
Yes. So, this is the tactic that the Bush administration perfected. Every time they wanted something, it was the war on terrorism. Fear is the way we had governance. We had governance under the threat of fear. Well, we continue that. And that wasn't now the fear of terrorism. Now it was the fear of financial meltdown.
So is Obama a socialist?
Oh, definitely not. I joke sometimes.
He has been accused of being a socialist.
Some people have joked what has happened is been called socialism American style.
Socialism American style. Just like China saying it's the market economy, Chinese style.
Chinese style. So, but my Chinese friends tell me, no, this is not socialism, because socialism cares about people, ordinary people.
Wow, yes.
But when you're giving money to the richest Americans, that's not socialism.
No.
This is old-fashioned corporate welfareism. It's the same thing that Bush did, saving the corporations. You're supposed to have safety nets to protect people. The government, your prime minister said in his talk, he said, we put people first.
Right.
It's not corporations first. people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the money went.
Mm-hmm.
But what did we do in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
We put the banks first.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even do very much about the people losing their homes.
Mm-hmm.
We did trickle-down economics. We said if we poured enough, hundreds of billions of dollars to the banks, maybe ordinary Americans would benefit. Maybe.
That did happen. That did happen? Or hasn't happened?
No. But if we had begun by giving money to help more people losing their homes stay in their homes,
Yes.
there would have fewer foreclosures. We would have had trickle-up economics. And the banks then would have less foreclosures.
But Professor Stiglitz, you sometimes advocate government intervention. You are not a total capitalist. You believe in intervention at some level. This particular crisis involved government intervention too. So why are you against Obama's intervention?
There was a need for government intervention.
There was a
absolutely,
need.
absolutely. The private sector had totally failed.
Mm-hmm.
We should have had government intervention much earlier to prevent the failure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The irony is that in the name of keeping government out of the market,
Yes.
we wound up with the biggest intervention in the market.
Right.
So the mistakes of the free market economists like Greenspan have led to the largest role of government in America in its history. So what you want is what kind of intervention? Before the crisis, we should have had an intervention to make it less likely that we would have to collapse. Now that we had the crisis, we should have had the intervention that makes sure that we got the quickest recovery with the least cost.
Back to Asia. The Thai Prime Minister says we are recovering with a V-shaped style. Do you agree?
Yeah, all the evidence suggests that. Now, some of this has to do with the, you might say, the overreaction of the markets. That part of Asia's consequence was a sharp inventory reduction, in part caused by rapid credit contraction, the loosening of credit, restoration of inventories, meant that you got this V-shaped recovery. The question is, given that America is likely not to have a robust recovery, if Asia is going to continue to have robust growth, it has to change its model. It cannot be as dependent on exports to the U.S. And this is a problem that Asia as a whole has to face, because quite often, not every country in Asia exports to the U.S., some export to China, but many of the exports to China are inputs to Chinese exports to the United States. So the Asian system is very heavily dependent on exports to the U.S.
So that model has to change.
That model has to change.
Would that be your advice to the Thai Prime Minister? Be your advice to the Thai Prime Minister?
What has to do is to try to go further in exactly something that he said, regional cooperation. And that the economies in Asia are very dynamic. China is pulling out from the crisis very strongly, without dependence on America. India looks like it's surviving much better than many of the other countries. So Asia as a whole is doing very well. And now the big challenge is, with all this growth within Asia, to increase the domestic base of investment, consumption, stay open, but not dependent on the U.S.